You have to advocate for yourself, and you have to ask for what is it that you need. And that starts by understanding what is it that you need in this new role as a manager, right? What are the support, the resources you need to be successful as a manager of people, as a people leader in that organization? So I think advocating for yourself also is very significant, and not just assuming that the company, will give you that training and support. Taking ownership will only drive your career forward. It won't hurt it.
Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, where lifelong learning takes center stage. Our show is for leaders with an insatiable appetite for growth and the courage to step out of their comfort zone and help redefine what leadership needs to look like for generations to come. I'm your host, Damon Lembi, 3-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people. Joining me today is my good friend, Elena Agar. She's the co-founder and CEO of ShiftWell, a human-centered tech platform that's transforming both performance and well-being. She's got over 15 years of experience working across higher education, corporate learning, and entrepreneurship. Plus, she has an amazing podcast called Shift with Elena. I'm looking forward to discussing a bunch of different topics today. We're going to start with why if you don't build a learning culture, your company's going to fall behind. Also, how do you prepare middle managers, one of the toughest jobs out there, to set them up for success? Why curiosity and critical thinking are the two most important skills in the age of AI. And she's got this really interesting idea, and it's all about taking the holistic approach to performance by connecting learning, well-being, and culture. So Elena, if leaders aren't preparing their managers for AI, especially around talent development, what impact is that going to have on their organization, let's say in a year from now?
Well, it's going to begin a very steep decline of their organization and potentially their marketplace. So like their existence in the marketplace. And ultimately, I would say those people need to start looking at some kind of career change that doesn't have to do with technology, because that's where they're going to find themselves. And a lot of people are saying, listen, maybe it's the blue collar jobs that you might have to go to. But the reality is, if you're not sustaining your business by continuously staying on top of learning and figuring that out, you're going to find yourself quickly out of business.
I'm in agreement with you. And I know you work with a lot of middle managers and coaching them on career advice and everything. When it comes to learning right now, what direction do you recommend they take?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So depending on the organizations that you work with, so I like to keep it real. So there are middle managers.
I like that about you, by the way. Keep it real.
Yeah, so I want to keep it as practical as possible to people who are listening, because I think there's a lot of organizations where middle managers find themselves where they do have that time to learn and to implement, and it's more about like, what do I actually make time to learn, right? And then there's other organizations where middle managers, as much as they want to learn, there's simply no time. There really, literally just no time for them to learn unless they spend their, waking days and weekends and hours, in the middle of the night learning. And what I mean by that is that if you're a manager in a organization that does not create the space for learning, meaning you're completely billable hours, you're spending already 10, 12 hours a day working, your brain is not designed to learn at that point. There's very little you can do from a human development perspective to force yourself to learn, because you're just mentally exhausted. So the first thing I would recommend those managers is to actually have the conversation with their senior leadership around creating the space. Like, that's a larger conversation, because you, on an individual basis, might, want to learn and so on. But if you're continuously running and fighting, fires in an organization, it's very hard for your brain to have the space to learn. So the first thing I would recommend for those managers is have a larger discussion about what does it mean to learn your organization, how important it might be. And then ultimately, you might have to make a decision that this is not an organization that cares about learning and growth, and I might need to move on. So that's the real part of it. On the other side, if you are a manager, mid-manager in an organization that does create the space, that does care about learning, then really it's up to you as a manager to then look at, and maybe, again, you don't need to have all the answers, but have conversations around what is it that it's important for you to focus on with your team, for you as a manager, but also what does it look like? What does learning look like for your team?
What I find too is a lot of middle managers get dropped into the role. They're a high-performing individual contributor, and they move into a management role for the very first time, and it's a completely different skill set, and they don't get any training. So, I mean, that's another reason to double down on why it's so important to invest in those individuals.
Absolutely. So again, two sides to the story. You have the organization, you have the individual manager. So oftentimes the managers that are placed into these management roles, to your point, they might not have the training, but also they might not actually want to manage. So I think communicating to your senior leadership, if that's even the road you want to go into, first and foremost, right? I think that's important because there's a lot of managers that kind of get promoted without realizing the expectations that what it means to be a manager. So I think just understanding that for yourself, and is that something you see yourself doing? Number one. If it is something you see yourself doing and you do want that management responsibility, then really understanding that sometimes you will have senior leadership who may not understand what skills you might need. And that's just a reality that a lot of managers find themselves in. We expect that the organization is going to know exactly what we need as managers for us to be successful. And here where it doesn't always happen. In an ideal world, sure, your senior leadership, whoever we report to, is going to have a separate onboarding for you as a manager into this new role. They're going to reset expectations with you. They're going to provide you resources and support that you need in this new role. They're going to help you delegate things off so that you can manage people and devote time to things that matter for the team and the business. But if that doesn't happen, then you have to advocate for yourself and you have to ask for what is it that you need. And that starts by understanding what is it that you need in this new role as a manager. Right? What are the support, the resources you need to be successful as a manager of people, as a people leader in that organization? So I think advocating for yourself also is very significant, and not just assuming that the company, will give you that training and support. They may or may not, but it's up to you to actually ask for it.
I like what you're saying here because a lot of times people look at it like it's my company's responsibility to take care of me. Big bad company, they're not doing anything. I completely agree with you. You need to take ownership yourself. Nobody cares about your career as much as you do. So you can't just sit back and wait for it to happen. You have to advocate for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think, and listen, the organization partially have the responsibility. Sure, like we can say that, but if it doesn't, are you just going to let your career slip away? Like, that's the thing. Like, if your organization doesn't come and give you the step by step of how to be a manager, are you just going to be like, well, that's great. I had a good run, etc. No, you won't. So you might as well get ahead of it and accept it that this is not how this organization functions. And if you accept it and can manage up and manage kind of across board, whether it's working with your HR folks in terms of helping you get the right resources, whether it's with your senior leadership, then, that's what you have to do. Or again, you go back to saying, that's not the organization I want to be a part of it. Maybe I need to move on. But the choice is yours ultimately. And I think, taking ownership will only drive your career forward. It won't hurt it.
Let's help out some senior leaders right now and give them some practical advice or some tips to help weed out people in the process of whether or not they should move into leadership. Do you have any specific questions or things that they should be looking for before they move somebody into a leadership role?
Number one, first ask them. Make sure that this person, no matter how much potential you think this person has, and no matter how great they've been as a technical person, as an individual, contributor, ask them first. I think that doesn't happen enough. Ask them, make sure they understand what it means to be a manager, right? So that's first, because I think that happens more often than not, like people placed into management roles and they don't want to be there. And then what happens is they burn out and then they leave the company because you set them up for something they have no interest in doing. And it ultimately costs them their, growth in your organization. So ask, number one. Number two, I would say somebody who is really good at managing stakeholders, right? So somebody who has that combination of the functional technical expertise you might need, but also somebody who has that, the social skill, the humans aspects to it, right? Somebody who is coming up with ideas, somebody who can get the room together and initiate projects and get things started, somebody who can, really spark that growth mindset in a company. I think somebody who comes up with ideas, because ultimately, the manager is the one that's supposed to inspire and motivate and excite people. And they can only do that if they already embed those qualities and characteristics of somebody who's curious, somebody who's excited, somebody who is, really understands how to manage all the different relationships, because that's what management is about. It's less about the functional, the technical, although you need that to make sure you're mentoring and coaching your team members and make sure like they're doing what they need to be doing and helping, like mentoring them in that space. But ultimately, you want somebody who really kind of has that curiosity, has those abilities to manage the different stakeholders in an organization. I would say like those, ask them, number one, make sure they want to be, and then look for some of those character traits.
Yeah. And when you do ask them, I think it's important that you dig deeper than just asking them. Because sometimes they'll say they want to do it, but for the wrong reasons. It looks better on my profile. But you even want to ask them questions like, have you ever coached a team before? Or what excites you about helping other people, to kind of make sure that they're looking at it for the right reasons, which I think is super important. One of our clients, I thought was pretty interesting, is they have a leadership program. But one of the things where Learn It adds business value, and we're going to get into this about how learning can bring business value, is that they have a pre-leadership program that they put people through, on courses around trust and delegation and feedback. And a lot of times people opt out into leadership after going through some of those things, because once they see what it really requires, they don't want to do it. So I thought that was kind of an interesting approach too. But let's let's take a step back and walk us through a quick version of your path to where you're at today.
Yeah, sure. So I think like a lot of learning and development professionals, I started my career in higher education. So I've always really wanted to work with people. That was my strength. I wanted to kind of, work with young generations and like kind of just help them develop the skills necessary to be successful, because I felt like I was missing a lot of that mentorship and coaching in my career coming up. So that kind of naturally, I fell into higher education. And then I quickly realized that as much as I love the impact I was making with students and kind of alumni of those institutions, I realized it wasn't the scale that I wanted to reach. So then I kind of shifted towards corporate learning. And then this has kind of spent the rest, the majority of my career now is in that corporate learning space. I've done everything from facilitating to training to program management to content creation, speaking, all of those things. So that's kind of where I've been. I've spent a lot of time in the early kind of young talent pipelines. That's why I really enjoy that space, because of my higher education experience. But then I also work a lot with the middle managers. And then I've done that as a consultant in my own business. And then of course, internally in organizations as well. So.
And now you're out on your own.
Yes, partially out on my own, on my second second venture called ShiftWell with two brilliant co-founders. And it's, I was actually on a different podcast and I was saying, and people are like, well, what's inspiring you to always go back to that entrepreneurship, to go back to that world? And I was like, because I want to build and create, and you can only do so much internally in an organization. You really can't run as fast as you want to as a builder, creator, an entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it. Internally, not always, like depending on the organization you work with, but I was always kind of hungry to develop and just build something. And I'm oozing with ideas and I like to bring them to fruition. And so that's where I'm at now. It's one of the things that I always say, like I keep doing, because that's the one of the few things that I'll regret on my deathbed is not building and creating something I believe can impact like a lot of people. So
yeah, and I can't wait to get into ShiftWell. But first, I want to start with how can learning, because sometimes L&D gets a bad rap. It's just looked at as a sunken cost, for your organization. But how can we turn learning into helping with business outcomes? Where do you see it fit in to really drive growth or retention or whatever you think can best impact both the individual on your team and the organization?
Sure. I think this is where we really turn the tide in learning and development space. And I think the way learning and development professionals view today, I think we have a lot more, results, a lot more impact that people are seeing, because if we learned anything in the last few years and with all the AI and all the technologies, that if you don't learn, you're basically left behind. So like if you're not already learning and continue to innovating and inspiring that learning journey, and you are a learning organization, you're already behind. Like just close your shop, just finish your clients and close out shop. Like really, like I really feel that way. Like if you're not learning, like you're in the next 1 to 2 years, you're gonna come to realization very quickly that this, you're just going to be left behind. I really foresee this. Again, it's an opinion, basically, obviously, but I really think that if you're not investing to learn, so number one, you don't have a choice anymore. It's simply good business, because and I think a lot of times we think about well, companies are so focused on today, like we have a problem we need to solve today. Yes, but what about a year, 2 years from now? Because what is this crazy focus on today costing you a year or 2 years from now? What is this lack of focus on the future going to cost you? And that cost is going to be much more significant than you think. And I think this is where it's like the marshmallow test for adults. You know what I mean? Like, how much can you sustain the pain today to prevent a bigger pain 2 years from now? So I really, I mean, I'm the biggest critic of L&D. Like I'm my own biggest critic and our industry and so on. I speak frequently on these topics. And yes, before maybe we're like, okay, we could have done better. Now it's just a non-negotiable to have learning. And so for the individual, when I say it's good business, what I mean by that, if people are learning and growing and progressing in their careers and driving that internal satisfaction to be valuable to a company, right? To actually do something with their days that means something, that means your retention will go up. That means if they're learning, your corporate brand is going to be shining, because young people today, that's what they want. When you ask them what is the most important thing they want in a company, aside from salary and all that good jazz, the next, like one of the biggest top things is learning. They want to grow. They want to stay, they want to innovate. They want to be curious. They want to feed that builder creator in them that a lot of people have. And so I think it's just good business for retention and attracting the right talent to have a learning for the individuals. For the organization, if you don't have future teams, I don't know if you want to call it like a future team or somebody like a group of people who are focused purely on how is the business going to be impacted a year, 2, 5 years from now? And what do we as an organization need to do on an organizational level and also on individual level to prepare ourselves and our staff to thrive in this new economy? And in this case, a lot of the talk about AI right now, right? Like, so this is, these are the things when you start thinking, we can talk more about the AI piece. But yeah, I think it's, I think at the end of the day, it's just, it's good for business. And I think we've seen this over and over again.
One thing I'll challenge you on, it's not just young individuals who want learning. I've seen it across the board that different generations also want to continue to grow and develop their skills as well. So, I mean, it is so important. And you mentioned learning organization. So how would you define the learning organization? And also, what role do senior leaders or CEOs have to really make it real? Because it's one thing to say we're a learning organization. It's actually another thing to really be one.
Yeah, so I think on the most basic level, or learning organization is the one that provides continuous feedback. That feedback is part of the culture, that challenging and creating space for, healthy debates when you're developing products, right? Like these sort of things. Like it's not just like, well, here we have an LMS, we have a learning management system, and we have this tool, we have a bunch of tools you can use, we have a bunch of classes you can take. I don't think it's that. I think it's having that continuous accountability culture where everybody is continuously challenging each other in a healthy way, providing feedback to each other about things they can do differently, things they can do better, right? This continuous feedback loop, I think, is a big part of being a learning organization, right? Also, an organization that invests into innovation, into developing new tools, into developing new products, into staying on top of the market trends. And, to your point about the managers and leadership, I think this is where you either succeed or you fail as an organization. If your managers and leadership does not, show up to some of those sessions, if your management and leadership are not open to feedback that they actually take and consider, maybe not take 100%, but maybe consider, if they're not actually involving themselves as part of that innovation, discussion, debate, feedback loop, then it's really hard for the rest of the team to do that. And middle managers are usually the ones left with this task of, we just need to have creative teams and innovate and all of that. But if your leadership and managers are not showing up in that way, not only is the middle manager not seeing the example that they should be passing on to their team members, but also the whole team sees that you're not showing up to certain, team, whatever, I'm not saying events, but like team brainstorm sessions. You're not there when your team developed a product and they want to showcase this to you, right? If somebody has feedback, you're not taking it seriously, which is why employee surveys are a waste of time for everybody and a waste of money, because nothing ever happens. Like, that's a sign to me that company does not want to learn and grow, right? That company just does it for the sake of ticking the box. And I think we're going to see a lot of those kind of companies, again, just go down very fast and out of business.
One thing you said a lot of stuff that was great. feedback is key. Feedback is fuel for growth. Talk about it all the time. It's one thing to give feedback, but it's another thing to be able to receive feedback. And you don't have to do anything with it all the time, but there's a lot of gold in there very often. Now, another thing you said is that when it comes to learning, it's creating a space also for people to try and experiment and fail at things, right? So, and not be reprimanded for failing. So when we say learning organization, I mean, you're in the business, I'm in the business. Of course, I want them to buy your coaching and your tools and learn at courses. But at the end of the day, that's not it. Especially if you're on a shoestring budget, there's a lot of different ways that you can do internal cross-department mentoring, book clubs. It's just all about really, and I think you're going to agree with me on this. Sometimes it's less about what you learn and just getting in the practice and building the muscle of actually learning itself.
Absolutely. And I want to comment on that. And the one thing I want to add is that to have like really proper processes and systems in place to have that learning, to make sure that learning happens. So what I mean by that is that, like, I've spent a lot of time in the billable space, meaning that everybody is like 100% billable to an external client, right? Not even to an internal. So you need to embed 15% of everybody's time annually, for example, right? Or 10%, whatever makes sense for you, into these learning, opportunities, right? So that, because right now learning in a lot of organizations, managers and employees feel like, well, I'm already given 100% to this client or to this work. I just don't have space to learn, right? And so, creating that space, and then as a managers and leadership, keeping people accountable to actually leaving that 10%, 15% for learning and not filling it with client work, right? That, having that discipline and accountability in place is also equally as important. And then going back to your point around, I think one question I like to ask around making sure that learning happens in whichever way, like you said, like it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It doesn't have to be something out of the, crazy things. It can be as simple as, what can we do internally? Who can we reach out to internally that is maybe already doing some of this learning on their own, that can do like a knowledge sharing peer learning session, right? I think asking questions here is very important, like asking ourselves, like, what haven't we tried? If this was possible, what would be the options? What are our, what's the lowest hanging fruits? What's a quick win we can have? Who can we engage in this discussion? This happened with an organization I was working with, primarily remote team. And as the conversation about AI comes out, and they're like, well, we're not sure, like, how do we even get started? I said, you should just ask your team, it's a team of developers, like, what are they doing to learn about AI? I guarantee you somebody on the team is already doing something in AI space that they can start the conversation. They can start some of the, areas that you can, work on as a team. And of course, as predicted, there was a couple of people that were actually so deep into AI and have taken courses and like really curious about that stuff that they were able to say, hey, actually, I think as a company, based on the work that we do, here's what I recommend that our team learns when it comes to AI.
One of the things we do with our clients, we like to call it LTO, learning time off. You know how people have PTO? We try to tell our organizations that we work with, hey, set aside that 10 or 15% of time to do it, and look at it that way. And a lot of times we want to start with getting the middle managers to go through training. So then they get experience with working with us and they see the value in it. So then they can free up the people who report to them as well, because sometimes they look at it like, well, we got to get these projects done and we don't have time for training. But, if they see the value and how at the end of the day, maybe, investing that time will make them more efficient and most importantly, not lose great talent, because it costs a great deal of money to replace talent. The other thing is, Elena, I've heard is great companies invest about 2% of their annual revenue into learning. And I don't know the exact study around it, but I mean, the impact it has, whether it comes to retention or efficiency or getting to market quicker with products, is huge. So that's a big one. Now, let's talk about AI a little bit. I'm not talking about, building prompts or agents or whatever like that, but what are some of the core skills that you think are critical right now for the everyday middle manager leader when it comes to working with AI?
Sure. So, but first of all, by no means am I an expert in AI. I only know it in my own kind of world of talent development and what I think about when it comes to like what are the things that I spend, like what I'll lose sleep over right now. So I can share some of
Yeah.
that. And I think, I think we don't really, there's a lot of things that can be done with AI, and I don't think anybody really knows, but I think what is a foolproof strategy is to be curious about AI. And what I mean by that is just understanding from a larger perspective, like if we're just looking at a macro level, like how is this impacting your industry? Like what are some innovations that are happening in your industry when it comes to AI products, tools, and so on that can potentially either help you drive your business forward, help your team members become more efficient, more productive, less stressed out, whatever it is. Right. So I think just being curious about that. And there's very practical ways to do that is just go into any different newsletters. There's a ton of newsletters from futures, from AI companies that release like different information about how, I mean, even the ChatGPT 5 release, if you watch the hour release video that they did, they talk about how different industries can be impacted with this new product, right? Like I think just playing around with it is super interesting. And that just came out like 2-3 days ago. So even just staying on top of their releases alone is helpful. And then also like signing up to newsletters in your industry that work with AI and so on. So I think that's practical. You don't need to OD on it. You don't need to go crazy with it. Just little 5-10 minutes every day, read up on, on some of these newsletters that make sense for you. So I think being curious is very important from like a macro level. And then based on that, really just kind of, looking at, I think from a business perspective, how I think about it is, okay, so how can I deliver a service or product to my client that can be, scalable to them, but more efficient, maybe cost them less, right? But still drive that impact. Like that's what I think about. Like, how can I solve my client's biggest problems in the organization, right? And in the case of ShiftWell, I'm thinking, how do I scale learning in a way that's individualized? Like, how do we help people have happier, healthier, productive careers that ultimately drive business growth without costing an arm and a leg to the company? And in a way that's, again, one size fits all and not one size fits all. I mean, fits all. So, sorry, one size fits one, not one size fits all. My bad. I knew I said it wrong as soon as that came out of my mouth. So how do we create?
You got it there.
Yeah, the second one. So it's so these are the things I'm thinking about. Like, so I think number one, not just thinking about AI, like be curious about it, but then think about it from a problems perspective. And I think when you do the two things, stay curious, stay on top of what's happening, and at the same time look at problems that your clients, your organization, your business has, and then how do you combine the two? And I guarantee you'll come up with something. And it just takes a little bit of consistency and time.
I totally agree. And I think that the skills that are key that people need to continue working on these days when it comes to leveraging AI is critical thinking, problem solving, and communication. We're seeing a lot of our clients out there who, their staff are worried, is AI going to take our jobs? We've all heard that, right? And so even had situations where people are sabotaging AI initiatives because they're afraid of what's going to happen. But if their organizations are better at being, transparent and sharing the game plan of how they're going to leverage AI and it's not going to affect their jobs, in certain cases, you're going to have a lot more success with it. And so I just think a lot of these soft skills aren't really that soft these days. They're really, really key, for the future moving forward.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about AI. I think there's a lot of that fear out, it depends on who you listen to. I think there's a lot of fear and certain, areas where people just trying to instill that fear about AI. And I think there's certain realities we need to face, but I think that there's so much more abundant opportunities, to your point, to even access to skills that everybody can develop: critical thinking, communications, growth mindset, curiosity. So if I'm an employee, I'd be less concerned than putting my energy into how AI is going to impact me versus just actually putting my energy towards here's what I can control and here's what I can do. And it's all those skills. And as an organization, same thing. Like I just don't think that if you're equipping yourself with curiosity and continuous learning and creating space for yourself and also for your organization to learn, to inspire other people to learn around you, right? Creating that space, you can't lose. Like it's a win. It's going to be a win. And I think just put your energy there. That's what I, recommend to people. I see AI as just like every other technological advance. that's happened in the past, that like when my parents talk about things and when I listen to my mom, she grew up in communist Russia, and the things that they didn't have access to, and then they did, and everything was fine. And sure, with AI, it's just moving in a much faster pace, and that's the scary part. But we have adjusted as human beings, and we'll adjust to this as well. And it's up to us to just focus on what do we need to do to adjust versus being scared of it.
And when it comes to adjusting, that's our world too, learning and development. And we've touched on it a little bit, but I want to dig a little deeper now into, first of all, I really like your holistic approach to learning. So let's talk about that. And then let's get into your new tool, ShiftWell.
Sure. So when I think about holistic approach to learning, what I think about is we talk a lot about learning, and something I mentioned in the beginning. If you're completely overwhelmed in your work, you're just it's humanly impossible for you to learn effectively. So if you're overwhelmed, stressed out in your day-to-day work, it's very difficult for you to learn effectively and apply the learning, right? So when I think about, the holistic approach to learning, I think about our environment, right? So where we work, our home environment, where we spend our time, and so on. I think about the social pieces, how connected we feel with our colleagues, how connected we feel with our manager, right? We don't need to be best friends, but we need to feel like we belong in our organization. We need to feel like we're connected. We need to have relationships. So, and then I think about the financial impact of learning, right? If you're going from paycheck to paycheck and you're completely stressed out of home for whatever financial reasons, right? It's also very difficult for you to learn. If your physical health is struggling, if you're sleeping 2 hours a night, if you are, on the verge of burnout, you're not creative, you're not learning, you're not innovative, you're spending more time in sick leave, you're spending more time in, with your healthcare provider. So when I think about learning, I think about it's not just here's the thing that I need to learn. It's all these other factors that will impact how the learning is applied, remembered, so on.
And so it's really almost like work-life integration when it comes to it, right? Because it's just, like you said, if you're stressed and you're getting 2 or 3 hours a night sleep, and you go through a class or you do coaching, you're not going to retain anything anyways. And that's one of the biggest gaps I think that we have in our industry is how, it's you go through and you take a class on, let's just say, feedback, it doesn't make you a feedback expert, right? And if you put that on top of that things are bothering you at home, you even have a less chance of succeeding in it. So let's go into ShiftWell. What is it and who's it for and how is it going to, transform the learning world? And I'm with you on this one.
Yeah, and it was built out on this premises that I was just saying about that me and my co-founders were saying, we've all been in the learning field and in technology and tech and different industries, and we're saying, how is it that we're spending millions of dollars as organizations on learning, on all these initiatives, on well-being initiatives, right? But burnout is more than ever. Engagement is still down. I mean, like, it's depressing to read the Gallup report every year. I'm like, well, it's probably hasn't changed much. And it hasn't. Only 25, like a quarter of your employees are engaged in their jobs and, and so on. And people still want to learn, but not much learning takes place. L&D still gets a bad rap because there's no ROI. So it's like, and the well-being industry is like a whole other animal on its own. I mean, it's just a giant in terms of the amount of money companies spend on Fitbits or, yoga mats. And they think that this is going to help them.
60 billion or something, right?
It's billions it's 60 billion, I think, just in the US, if not globally, on learning and development, meaning like training, soft skills training, hard skills training. It's 380 billion probably at this point globally that companies spend. It's a ridiculous amount of money. And the problem is getting worse. And I think it's because we're measuring and solving the wrong problem. And the problem that we're solving is siloed, right? We're solving the problem of management. Let's just give them management training, right? We're solving the problem of well-being. Oh, people are stressed out. Let's give them an app. So, and it's like one size fits all, right? So it's like, we're just giving these blanket, initiatives and trainings to people who are very individualist. Everybody has a different DNA. And so ShiftWell is a solution that we came up with. It's a tech solution that actually looks at your human DNA, not human DNA is the physiology, human DNA, but just like, what does it mean for you to thrive? What does it mean for you to be a high performer? And what it does is it looks at all these different elements that by research impacts performance. So some of the elements are like mindset, environment, social aspect, right? Career, meaning, purpose. So it looks at all of these different elements that, through lots of data and literature that kind of backs up this, that says it's, learning, growth, leadership, all that. It's not just about, how to manage people. It's much deeper than that. And so it's your unique DNA that makes you, good at what you do, helps you thrive in an organization. So that's one part of it. And then it identifies gaps for the individual. So looking at, and Damon, your gap is going to be different from my gap, from the next person's gap. So it actually helps you look at the gaps that you need to work on for you to actually be at your best. And that gap might not be a bunch of leadership training. That gap can be as simple as your focus. You need to focus on your health. You need to actually focus a little bit less on, your social aspects, because you're really great at that. You're overflowing in that area and that element. But maybe you need to think about some balancing act of some other elements that you need to focus on. So it really creates a very unique kind of data and reporting around what does it mean for you to thrive as an individual from all these different areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I hope it does tell you need some leadership training, because you could either come to me, learn it, or to you. But how does it gain this information? I mean, is it like agentic AI? Is it like a conversation it has with you? Is it a multiple choice test? Or, how does it gain the information?
So it's a set of, it's an assessment with some specific criteria that we've set in terms of the kind of questions that are asked. So the questions are a little bit different from your traditional, it's completely different from an engagement survey. It's completely different from a leadership survey. It's not going to come out and say, well, you're in red or you're in blue or you're in green, or a combination of each. So it's an assessment with also some open-ended questions that actually help us identify the unique results that are driven through this data gathering and assessment. I'm trying to say enough without giving all of it away, so to say, but so yes, it is a set of questions, of course, as well as some AI components that help create a report that is very unique to you. And then the most important, not the most important, equally as important, Damon, you and I both know, when a person takes an assessment, when they take a leadership assessment, name whichever, not to name any specific ones, what it gives you is it gives you a report. And then sometimes you're like, okay, cool, this is where I am. And you don't really know what to do with that. And the only option for you to figure that out is you have to pay a coach or a debriefer a bunch of money, or for your organization has to pay a bunch of money to, a person to debrief you to help you make sense of what does it actually mean for me to be in the red and the blues, areas of this report. And so it doesn't actually tell you how do you close those gaps. And also, even if they do hire you, an external coach or a debriefer person, or hold like a little, group coaching session, they're not going to be there to hold your hand. And this is where an AI coach comes in very handy. An AI coach that is not a ChatGPT, that is a true coach that is there then to help you set specific goals and behaviors that you can change, who will keep you accountable. In our case, her name is Clara, the AI coach. I guess it's a her. So she's Clara. This is the first time I'm thinking out loud with this, so I'm not sure, but she's Clara. And so she will actually be there with you to help you set those goals, to keep you accountable, to nudge you, and to help you drive your own behavior in specific gaps, and the gaps that you need the behavior change most often. Because that's another thing that, none of these leadership developments, or personality assessments do, is they don't actually help you develop a plan, and they're not there to keep you accountable. So for the organization, you and I both know most of these kind of services like coaching and debriefing sessions are only for the senior leadership or for like managers and up. They're not scalable across the organization. So what happens to that high potential employee who's not getting that attention from the manager that they need, but they have all these gaps that if they were just to close them, they will be performing, they'll be thriving, the retention will go up, absenteeism will decrease, right? And on top of that, the beautiful part about, so that's the individual piece, but the beautiful part about ShiftWell is that it's not just about the individual. What about you as a manager? So we've talked about all these problems that managers have, right? They need to lead, they need to manage, they need to be individual contributors. They're managing more people than ever before. What if, as a manager, you got a health report of your team, not a health, like physical, but just like an overall health report of your team, and to say, listen, Damon, I know you got 30 people working with you, and I know it's probably impossible to give every single person attention that they deserve. But you know what? Out of the 30 people, 25 people said X, Y, and Z about their work environment. And here's how you as a manager can actually impact. So now you as a manager have actual behavior and impact, a action you can take to actually impact the performance of your team as a whole, right? So that takes.
So, but what do they do?
Yeah.
What do they do? So here's 25 people on my team. There's 6 people who are struggling with this. Do I go to Clara and say, hey, Clara, how do I help overcome this challenge? And then start an AI conversation with Clara around that?
Yep, absolutely. So that's something managers can do. So Clara becomes a coach for them as well, not just for them as an individual contributor, which obviously, as everybody will take the assessment, will have that piece to them, but they will actually have them as like a manager's coach to help the manager think through actionable, impactful things they can do as the manager to drive the performance of the team further, right? Because it will actually give them things they can impact. So the way the report is set up, it will give them, it's not going to give them, hey, Damon and, and Katie and Ashley are not sleeping well. That's not your necessarily problem as a manager, unless they say, we're not sleeping well because this project is stressed out. I mean, this project is, 10, 12 hours a day for us, right? So you're not going to worry about those pieces. You're going to worry about the pieces that you can actually impact as a manager. So that's one. So what it does for the manager and the individual, it puts ownership, something we talked about right earlier, ownership into the individual hands to say, here's what you can do. And it creates, again, that ownership and responsibility and accountability. For the manager, it takes the heavy lifting off of them, because they're not going to be able to spend, individual time with each person, not always. And then for the HR people, again, it will take the heavy lift of, what is everybody struggling with? What are some obstacles they have? Because it puts that ownership in individual hands. So HR and managers can spend time on things that actually matter.
Well, let's take it up even another level, CFOs. So if the CFOs have to sign off on the check, what is the ROI they're going to see on this overall?
Yeah, absolutely. So even if
I know it's a tough one.
No, so part of our market research, we actually did interview a number of CFOs that that's a big question, because these are the people that are signing off. So from a senior leadership perspective, whether you're the person signing a check, whether you're CEO of a company, what you're doing is that what you're getting as a result of this is that we know through research and literature and everything that's out there that performance is not just clocking in, clocking out, and doing the bare minimum. Performance is having people that are not burned out, having people that are thriving, having people that are enjoying their work and that are progressing. So what it gives you is that if a person is able to close the gaps, if they're closing those gaps by default, if they're healthier, happy, more productive, progressing organization, by default, your organization benefits because your retention goes up. Your people are taking less sick days, because they're closing gaps that are most impactful, right? In some of those cases, your managers are spending time in areas that are most impactful versus wasting a bunch of time and going in a complete, just vicious cycle of things that don't make an impact, that they cannot control at the end of the day. Absenteeism decreases. So you have people that are more productive, more excited about work. And all that adds up to a lot of money for the company, right? So productivity, innovation, curiosity, all of that goes up if all these elements are aligned in a human being. And also the other thing is they can, of course, retake and actually see the results change. They can see the gaps. They can see the levels moving up and down to see which gaps are closing and so on. And finally, what it does also is it makes coaching scalable. It makes true individual learning and coaching scalable. And I think with the AI, with the way that it's going, and just the amount of scene that we work in the last year developing this, it's becoming so much better. And one of the things that people ask, one of the objections, like, well, are people really going to want to talk to an AI? Well, Damon, at the end of the day, I think
that was my next question. My next question.
So I felt it coming. It's a good question that we also often think about. So I think that what's going to happen, not I think, but what the reality is that sometimes you as an individual is not ready to have a certain conversation with your manager. You as an individual is not going to reach out to your manager or to your HR and say, I need help with, I don't know, X, Y, and Z that's out of their scope of work, but you still need that, right? You still need that help. So this assessment, again, because it looks at the holistic elements of what drives performance and well-being, it allows the individual to have those conversations with AI, which they'll probably feel more comfortable having that conversation with AI, and then the AI can help them have that conversation with their manager if it's a topic that can be had with their managers, right? So I think there's that. I think that also, of course, like with ShiftWell, we are offering a human coach as well as an option. But I really do see, based on just like everything that I've seen in this space, I really do see that this is going to become more and more prominent, especially for the younger generations. They're going to be more and more comfortable talking to an AI coach than to a human being.
I certainly hope so. I mean, backstage, I was talking to you that, Learnit's coming out with our AI coach. And one of the things that makes me nervous is are people ready and prepared to even try it, to give it a try? One thing I thought was pretty cool recently is one of our customers put about 80 of their people through just an AI writing course that we have. And I asked him what the biggest impact they got out of that. He's like, sure, it made their writing better. But he said, even more so than that, it got people more comfortable to even start diving in and using AI, when they see it wasn't, so overwhelming to do so. And I'm hoping that I know that as time goes on, people are going to be just like when COVID happened and, we didn't have any choice and we had to do doctors less virtually or even training virtually. I think as people become more comfortable with it, I think, ShiftWell and other products like that really personalize learning, like you're doing from a holistic perspective, are gonna crush it. Now, we're gonna wrap up here pretty soon, but one thing that I really enjoyed from talking to you last time is, look, we could learn all day long, but if we don't put it into use, who cares, right? I mean, so what's your quote that you got there on your computer? Did you forget it?
No, I have a couple. So I think the one you're talking about is to learn is wonder, to achieve focus.
That's it.
Is that the one you're referring to? Yeah. So yeah, to learn, wonder, to achieve, focus.
There you go.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite quotes. Yeah, you're right. Because if you're just learning for the sake of learning, you're just wondering, and not saying that's healthy. But I think if you want to achieve, you need to focus on what is it that you're learning? What is it? How are you going to apply it? And really just kind of be obsessed almost with that topic, with that thing, in order for it to, to embody it. And then when that's part of your habits, that's part of who you are and how you process and how you solve problems, then you move on to the next thing. But I think we should make time to wonder. I think that's what distinguishes us from AI, right? With this wondering that we can do as human beings.
What is one tip that you give to individuals for creating space, or what does that look like to find time to wonder?
I'll use something actually somebody else told me, a guest on my podcast that I've been now applying. So there's two. So one thing that he mentioned, he said, just sit, 10 minutes and just look at the ceiling, like nothing stimulating you in terms of, your phone. Don't listen to any music, nothing. Just sit there and just stare into a ceiling and just see what kind of, just wonder, see what's coming up. Maybe think about whatever problem you're solving, etc. For me, I like to do that walking. I think I do a little bit of that, but I like to walk and wonder. And what I usually do is first thing in the morning before everything else starts like jamming into my brain and all the tabs begin to open and feels like never close, I take a walk, and just like a really long walk or a bike ride, and just no headphones, no nothing, and just walk. And that is when, a lot of thoughts come, a lot of solutions, a lot of ideas, and I'll start jotting them down and then going down rabbit holes. I would say those two things. And because it doesn't have to be intense, you can combine with exercise, right? And it can be 5 to 10 minutes, right? For walking, I would recommend a little bit longer, but in terms of just staring at a ceiling, just start with 5 minutes.
Yeah. I don't know if I could do the staring at the ceiling thing. I'm too, anxious, I guess. Not anxious, but I'm glad you said that about walking, because I think one of the most enjoyable parts of my day when I can do it is just going for a nice 30 or 45-minute walk. I'll put music on, I don't even really hear it, but I feel like you just come up with great ideas, or things just pop in your head. And then what I do is I just talk it into ChatGPT and have it organize it for me at the end of the conversation. I mean, at the end of my conversation, at the end
come with yourself.
Yeah, conversation. Yeah, my daughter goes telling people that she's 8. She says, "Daddy, he's always talking to ChatGPT everywhere he goes. He's talking to it," which I am.
Yeah, you and I both.
Yeah, as we start to wrap up, so. Let's look at ShiftWell and fast forward 1 year from now. You sit down with your customer who's rolled it out to 100 people on their team. What do you want that conversation to look like?
I want that conversation to look like we want to roll it out to the rest of our team.
Well, that is their whole team. That is their whole team.
That's the whole the 100 people is their team. Okay, you see, I'm already thinking bigger.
Yeah.
The conversation, so they already rolled it out or they're going to roll it out?
No, they've rolled it out and they're excited to meet with you, to share with you how it's going.
I would say they have a team that is, I would say their absenteeism decreased by 30%. I say their productivity increased by 60 to 70%. I would say their sick leaves have decreased, and instead people just, actually taking PTO and, investing in their well-being and so on. So I would say, absenteeism decreased, sick leave decreased, innovation, conversations in organizations are much more focused towards innovation and that creativity and so on versus what's wrong and the problems. I would say, well, this is a fun one because this is one of the biggest reasons why I'm doing this. I would say their HR and L&D team told us how much money they saved by simply eliminating things that that brought zero value, like a bunch of tools and, benefits or whatever may be that did nothing for their employees. And as a result of ShiftWell, they realized that actually what their employees need and want is X, Y, and Z. And that's where they're investing their money versus, spending millions of dollars down the drain just because it's a nice to have or because it ticks the box and, everybody's doing it type thing. But I think that's probably the bigger one because I think that we've spent way too much money, and having been internally and L&D and so on, I can tell you we spend way too much money on things, waste too much money on things that don't drive behavior change, don't drive people forward, don't do, the tools that are just not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's my bet on ShiftWell.
I like it. So what I hear you saying is, from the employee perspective, they're more motivated. They feel like they belong in purpose, and this tool is really specialized for them. So they're getting a lot more value out of it. And then from the employer side, look, they're saving money because they're not spending wastefully. They're spending a lot more intentional, and retention's down and savings are up. I mean, perfect solution. What's one more thing you want to leave our audience with?
I would say just keep learning. I think, whatever that looks like, but just be strategic and intentional about learning. I think to your point, I really like the point about just learning, not just for the sake of learning, but learning things that are really going to impact you as an individual, you as a team leader, you as an organization. Where are you investing your time and energy? Because I think that's all we really have is our time and our energy. And if we're investing into things that don't help us drive the needle forward, whatever that needle is, whatever forward looks like to you, then we're just wasting time, money, and valuable time on earth, I guess.
No, I'm with you. And so, listeners, here's a couple of challenges I have for you. Elena brought up a great thing. Are you taking ownership of your career, especially when it comes to learning? If you're not, you need to do something about that. And number two, I want you to think about, what are you learning right now? And if the answer is nothing, okay, then it's time to pivot and change that. And even if it's not something directly related to your work, get out there and take a class or just do something around it. Get yourself in the habit of learning, because I truly believe in this age of AI and how fast everything's moving. It's important to learn, unlearn, and just have that learning agility. So Elena, this has been awesome. Look, I was on your podcast, Shift with Elena, which I really enjoyed. And but share with our audience, where else can they connect with you at?
Sure. So LinkedIn is where it's at for me. So LinkedIn is the best place. You can find anything and everything about me. And then my partner told me a long time ago, he heard me on a podcast and I said like, oh, you can just Google me. And apparently there's a song and it goes like, just Google me, baby. And so now I tell people like, just Google me, baby. No. And it's like a fun thing. And so like it sticks in me every time people ask me and I think of Google. So I'm also very much present on Google. You can find anything and everything about me on there too.
And I think a little tip on you, because, I did a bunch of research, is I think, because your last name's a little long to spell, but I think if you just type in Elena, Agar, you still show up all over the place. So Google me, baby.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's my brand name, Elena Agar. Yeah.
Yeah, so I love it. So anyways, thank you so much. This has been awesome. And listeners, do me a favor. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the Learn It All podcast. It really helps us get our message out. Leave us a review as well. And until next time, everybody, stay curious, keep learning. Have a great day. See you later.
Anytime you live by your highest value, your self-worth goes up. Anytime you live by lower values, your self-worth goes down. That's why I learned a long time ago, don't waste your time on anything but the highest priority in your life. Find out what that is.